Hello, everyone. My name is Andriana Gregovich. I am the Communications Officer for the Association of Former Members of Congress, and today I'm so excited to be here with Governor Jim Blanchard. Governor Blanchard was born in Detroit, Michigan, and served 4 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives before taking over what was described as the toughest governor's job in America. He served as the governor of Michigan from 1983 through 1991 and was credited by Newsweek magazine as one of the best governors in America. He also chaired the Democratic Governors Association. Governor Blanchard was later appointed ambassador to Canada by President Bill Clinton in 1993 and served in that capacity until 1996. Governor Blanchard currently serves as chair and president of the Foundation for the National Archives, co-chair of the Ambassador Circle for the National Democratic Institute, is chair emeritus government affairs for the global law firm of DLA Piper, and is on the board of directors for the International Spy Museum. And we are interviewing him on his role at the International Spy Museum today. Thank you so much for joining us, Governor.
Thank you.
I will go ahead and dive right in. How did you become involved with the board of directors of International Spy Museum after such a lengthy career?
Well, it was just a kind of a coincidence. I mean, I've always been interested in spycraft, but a daughter of one of my loyal supporters when I ran for Congress and governor learned that our law firm, DLA Piper, was attached to the same building that the first International Spy Museum location was situated. And so she invited me to a couple luncheons. I went there and enjoyed their programming, which has always been really good. I met a lot of people, including my former colleague Lou Stokes, congressman from Cleveland. And Lou had been chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he was on the board of the Spy Museum. After he retired and passed, they came to me and asked me if, they didn't use these words, but asked me to join the board. But I think I was their friendly, dedicated politician. So I think that's where it all started. And it's a wonderful museum supported by incredibly generous people.
Yes, I've been to the museum myself, and I completely agree. It's a wonderful, wonderful museum to visit. Speaking of your role as a politician on the board, you are the only former elected official, both governor and member of Congress, and former U.S. ambassador on International Spy Museum's board. How do you think your experience in those positions informs your role on the board?
Well, I did, in my previous roles, did deal with the intelligence agencies from time to time and was familiar with them, both overseas and actually with FBI here in the United States. So I had some contact with the CIA and NSA. And I think probably because most of the people involved with the Spy Museum have frankly been undercover or clandestine, or they don't describe what they've done, even if they're over here at the CIA headquarters. They're civil servants, and most of them paid very little to do a lot of stuff important to our country, risking their lives, but they're never really interfacing with the public. So I'm used to dealing with the public, with the press, with the philanthropic community, with Congress, with just external affairs. So I could give insights that I think are pretty wholesome and helpful to them, because they're just not used to coming out in the open and promoting themselves and what their passion has done for our country and our world.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point in terms of your role as a out-facing member of the board. As you mentioned, sorry.
So also, I'm really happy that our former members are going to have their annual statesmanship program at the Spy Museum, because it's a lot of our former members, understand the value of intelligence, and many of them have served in capacities monitoring our intelligence agencies as members of Congress. So it's just kind of nice. We're going to fuse the two together here, because those of sound mind truly appreciate each other in very important ways.
Yes, I completely agree. And with the connection that the intelligence community has to our military for our country, and all of our honorees this year are veterans. So I think it's very fitting that we're having it at the Spy Museum this year. And as you mentioned, Governor, that there are many members of the board, many members of this Spy Museum have seen incredible moments in history and have done incredible work for our country. Is there a specific moment in history of espionage that has stuck out to you or that you find particularly interesting?
Well, one that I can talk about was when I served as ambassador to Canada, and there was going to be an upcoming Quebec referendum that could be the beginning of a breakup of Canadian unity.
Hmm.
And so I was able to basically, this is now known in a book I wrote, uh, secretly have our USIA do careful polling in Canada to evaluate how they viewed us, the United States, how they viewed our leaders, how they viewed their leaders. And we were able to determine in a dramatic fashion, actually, our polls showed that President Bill Clinton was extremely popular in Canada, including Quebec, especially Quebec. And he was more popular than their leaders,
Hmm.
or the prime minister and others in Canada. And so we made the decision to play a helpful role in the Quebec referendum by strongly supporting a strong and united Canada. We changed our policy from studied neutrality to strong support for united Canada. I worked on that, of course, and my president, Bill Clinton, who's a master at communication, found ways to say that without appearing to meddle, but it made a big difference in helping save Canadian unity. And I will be forever proud of that and forever proud of President Clinton's role.
That is an incredible moment, one I personally hadn't even heard of prior to this interview. So thank you so much for sharing that. There are, of course, many moments like this in American history in terms of deciding importance in foreign affairs or in American affairs. And a lot of this is documented in the International Spy Museum. Is there an exhibit of yours, exhibit in the museum that is a particular favorite of yours?
Well, the current one is really interesting. It's called Bond in Motion, and everybody should want to go see it. And it has on location the actual 17 vehicles from various James Bond movies. Really interesting, from helicopters to a lot of different sports cars. It's really worth seeing and very colorful with a lot of commentary and video. It's really neat. A Bond in Motion now at the Spy Museum. I'll be there for another year. Another exhibit that I like there is called Spying Launched a Nation. And it's about how George Washington deployed spies and gathered intelligence, and it made a big difference in the victory of our patriots in 1776, 17, in the American Revolution. And that's a really interesting exhibition as well. There's so many others. It's just a great place. You can spend hours at the Spy Museum. And by the way, we have like 10,000 different gadgets and artifacts from, and some of them are displayed, some are not, but we are housing them and protecting them and guarding them. It's really exciting, actually, and fun.
That is, I'm very impressed by that number of materials and artifacts that's been collected by the museum. And I personally have spent, I think, a minimum of 3 hours trying to wander through the museum, and I still didn't see everything that there is to see. It's truly a feat. And as we mentioned before, FMC, a nonprofit, is really excited to be working with the Spy Museum, or being hosting our awards at the Spy Museum this year. And it's come to our attention that the Spy Museum is very passionate about philanthropy. What are the values that drive the Spy Museum's philanthropic endeavors?
Well, the big focus is education. And I work with different community groups, including the Boys and Girls Clubs of Washington, D.C. area. Our founder and his wife, the two of them, the founders, Milton and Tamara Maltz, M-A-L-T-Z, from Cleveland, have been philanthropists in a lot of areas. They created in Cleveland let's see what it's called, the Museum of Jewish Heritage. They created the Maltz Theater for Performing Arts in Jupiter, Florida. They were contributors to the Rock and Roll Museum. We make sure that we have programs that focus on education. We have various authors come and talk about the value of intelligence in management. The real theme really is good leaders need good intelligence. And people need to pay attention to detail and to strategy and tactics, things. And being well educated is really a requirement and willing to learn for anyone who deals with intelligence, whether it's just organizational or it's actually human intelligence, spying themselves. It's education that's the key. And we have a lot of educational programs. And the Maltzes contribute to so many different programs like that, both in Cleveland and around the country. I should add that while we are actively trying to raise money from the general community to support our programs, which is really important, the Maltzes have really created the situation in our new museum in the L'Enfant Plaza. I mean, I won't get into all the details, but they contributed over $100 million for this new facility. It costs more than that, and of course, we help pay off our finances with admission fees and others. And we are now we're now able to receive major gifts from different philanthropists and others. So we're really happy about that, but we're going to need to do more.
It sounds like then that the founding of the museum was based in education in terms of educating the public on our history, but also in promoting education for future leaders of America and showcasing that importance. So it makes sense that that would be a major value of the museum.
Yes, and our founder, Milton Maltz, he started out as a disc jockey in Chicago. He was drafted. They gave him a bunch of tests, and he must have really shown brilliance because they sent him to NSA in Maryland, and he came and worked in the National Security Agency, which is largely electronic intelligence, or at least it was. Had got a real appreciation for it. And then he ultimately went back, I think he went back to Chicago, was a disc jockey briefly, and then ended up finding a way to buy the station because they were not doing well. And one thing led to another. He bought one station, he was successful, another. He started buying TV stations. And all of a sudden, from Los Angeles to New York, including Michigan and Ohio, he becomes one of the major broadcasting owners in the United States. And he's given certainly the last half of his life to creating a better world, fighting hate, and educating our young people.
That's amazing. It's truly a great legacy to hold, and to kind of pass on to the Spy Museum.
Yeah, all the while too, his wife has been part of all this, and stays in the background, but without her, a lot of this couldn't have happened.
Sounds like it's a kind of a family endeavor then.
It's been a real, yeah.
You talked a little bit about kind of how the Spy Museum gives to boys and girls clubs, but in what other ways does the Spy Museum kind of give back to the community?
Well, they host different programs for schools. They've had community nights where they invite people over and to enjoy the place without having to pay admission. I know they've worked with Title I schools around the country, and they offer free field trips. It's really interesting that when people come to town and they hear about the Spy Museum, everybody is intrigued by it. There's almost an insatiable demand to know more about spying and its role. A lot of it's because of movies and things, but it's really interesting. And so we have so many good museums here in Washington, D.C., where I'm located right now. They really are great, but Spy, even though you have to pay a modest fee, draws everyone. It's really interesting. And we're not supported by the government. All the other museums are. So that's what we're doing. But we'll have between 700,000 and 800,000 visitors this year, 2024. And even during COVID, we had some limited openings, and did surprisingly well. We were able to quarantine people and keep them separate from each other, and we survived that. So I'm proud of the management there, headed up by Tamara Christian, who is a really good CEO. We also have a COO, Chris Costa, a former intelligence officer and White House advisor. And he goes out and does spy chats. He goes out and does programs all around the world about espionage and what it means and why good leaders need good information to make good decisions.
That's remarkable. And as you mentioned, I'm based in Washington, D.C. too, for those that don't know. And it's interesting to see how the Spy Museum, as you mentioned, it requires an admission fee versus some of the government-funded museums, the Smithsonian, that don't. But it still is such a important piece for people to come and visit. They are drawn, as you've said, to this espionage history. And it's amazing to see the Spy Museum understand that and go out of its way to make sure that they are accessible to the community, whether it's in spy talks, community programs, or ensuring that even during COVID, there are ways that we can continue to learn about the museum and its endeavors. While they're visiting the museum, I think we're coming to a close on our final question, Governor, but as we've talked about the draw people have and how many people are coming to the museum this year, you said between 700 and 800,000, I believe, in 2024. Yeah. What is the most important thing you want visitors to take away from their time at the museum?
Well, it's really the theme that I like to promote, which is good leaders need good intelligence to make wise decisions. You never have 100% of what's going on, but you need good intelligence to make decisions. And it's not just the fun of spying or trickery or whatever. It's to provide the president and our leaders, our military leaders, others, as good of information as we can get. And it's not all, it doesn't always work. It's not always perfect. But if you look at how we used intelligence to let all of Europe and Russia know that Putin was going to attack Ukraine, that's a remarkable exercise. We had it. Normally, you don't make that public. We decided we had to make it public so that all of our allies in NATO would be ready, and so would Ukraine. And we've never had NATO more united than right now. In fact, two countries wanting to join NATO that we never thought would, Finland and Sweden. It's pretty remarkable. And I think part of it was they had a lot of faith in President Biden's decisions because he released all that intelligence and they realized we really knew what we were doing, which is a great thing in today's dangerous world.
Absolutely. Intelligence clearly is such a cornerstone of American safety and American democracy. And we're so grateful for the Spy Museum for protecting its history and showcasing it to the public. Governor Blanchard, thank you so much for your time speaking with me today. We're appreciative of your role on the board at this International Spy Museum, and we're appreciative of your membership in FMC and the Association of Former Members of Congress. So thank you again very much for your words.
Yes, thank you. And I'm proud that the former members of Congress itself has great educational programs, and there's a partnership coming up this next week with the Spy Museum. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for listening.